What we're going to cover tonight is my favorite passages out of my favorite book, New Testament book, and that's Mark, the book of Mark. A lot of people kind of overlook it, but I think it's a very fascinating book. It has a lot to offer. When I was in seminary, Dr. Blevins taught on Mark, and one of our requirements in the class was to read the whole book of Mark in one sitting once a week. And it's not that long. It's the shortest gospel. It's not that long. You can do it in one sitting. It's not difficult. And you notice something different every time. Mark's gospel was written first. Matthew and Luke copied it. There's a whole bunch of sections of Mark in those books, word for word. Some of them been embellished and stuff of that nature, but it's a very, very important book for that purpose only. It was the first, and it was the pattern that Matthew and Luke used. They expanded on it. You don't have the genealogies in Mark. You don't have an extensive time after Jesus' death in Mark, but you have some interesting little themes, I guess you could call them, in Mark. One is called the Messianic Secret. And what that is if you read Mark all the way through, you'll say, my goodness, Jesus sure tells them not to go tell anybody when he does something. And he does that for a reason. And the reason is their understanding of who the Messiah was is totally different from who Jesus is. And so he's trying to keep them from going out and spreading the word where people are getting in their heads that this is a man that's going to kick the Romans out of Jerusalem, and he's going to take over and sit on the throne in Jerusalem. And so that's the Messianic secret. It's, shh, keep it quiet. Yeah, don't go tell anybody. But people go and do it anyway. And the first third of Mark is, who is this guy? Who is Jesus? What's he doing? Everybody's asking questions about it. The middle part of it is the disciples doing the same thing. They're trying to figure out who this guy is. He says he's going to be the Messiah. How can he be the Messiah when he's not going and carrying a sword and doing all these things he wants to do? And then the last part is when the powers that be, the Romans and everybody else, are after him. They're going to kill him. And of course, it's that killing thought starts in the front of the book, the first part of the book, but it goes all the way through. But in the last third, it's very, very prevalent. In the first third of the book, the one who gets it right is a demon. That's an interesting point. And at the end of the book, the one that gets it right is a Roman soldier. Who would have thought that would be what Mark would want to say? Now, the question always is, why did Mark even write it? Why did Mark sit down and write this book? And why did he write it the way he did? And I believe he wrote it that way because the congregation he was with and was dealing with, they were believers, but they didn't know this person, Jesus. They didn't know all these stories. They didn't know his teachings. They didn't know his healings. They didn't know the power that he had. And so he's writing this to share with them. And that's the reason at the end, it's not a big, long section about the resurrected Jesus, because they knew the resurrected Jesus. So he was meeting a need that he saw in his congregation there. Now, Mark probably was not an eyewitness of Jesus. for a lot of different reasons, and I don't want to go into them right now, but just trust me on that he was probably not an eyewitness. But he spoke to at least 3 eyewitnesses. Paul, who witnessed Jesus on the road to Damascus, Mary, the mother of Jesus, and Peter. He was with these 3 people for a long period of time before he wrote this gospel. And he writes the gospel right before or right during the fall of Jerusalem. It's a trying time. The news from Jerusalem is bad. The Roman legion is coming down from the north, from Damascus to Jerusalem to wipe Jerusalem out. And everybody knows it. It's not a secret. And so he is writing this because if they destroy Jerusalem, the church of Jerusalem will be gone. It'll be decimated. So they're fleeing. Everybody's fleeing out in all directions. So Mark has a reason to do this, a very important reason. And I think that's one of the reasons I'd like to challenge you to at least one time sit down and read Mark from beginning to end in one sitting. It's a big challenge, but I think you ought to do it. In Mark today, we're going to be in chapter 5, starting with verse 21. And this is one of Mark's sandwiches, Markan sandwich. And what that means is there's a story that starts, and then it jumps to another story, and then jumps back to the first story. So it's 3 parts. First story, second story, third story. And when we go through it, I'll point out some of the things that are interesting about it and what ties them together. And you may ask, well, why did Mark write this? I think, for the most part, was whoever told it to him told it this way, that's how it happened. That Jesus was in this place, and this event was happening, and then another event took place before he could finish the first one, and then the third half concluded it. Also, another element in this section of Mark is that Jesus is going back and forth across the Sea of Galilee. The western side of the Sea of Galilee is Jewish country. The eastern side is Gentiles. And Jesus is going back and forth across, either walking around the sea or riding in a boat. And I think the important thing about that is that even back then, Jesus is conveying that all people are God's people. That whether they're Gentile or whether they're Jewish. And so he's going back and forth doing this. And I think Jesus was doing this on purpose. Mark. And the reason I think some of these things about Jesus is I've read 2 books that basically says Jesus was a whole lot smarter than most people give him credit for. In fact, both of them concluded at the end of the book that he was the smartest human being ever to walk the earth. And I believe that. I believe he was. And he did a lot of things because he knew what he was doing. Some people say he was like a sheep led to slaughter. No, he was humble like a sheep led to slaughter, but he was not dumb. He was not stupid. In Mark, we find this, starting with verse 21. When Jesus had again crossed over by boat from the other side of the lake. Now, he's coming from Gentile to Jewish side. So he's coming back from the Gentile territory. A large crowd gathered around him, and he was by the lake. Then one of the synagogue rulers named Jairus came there. Seeing Jesus, he fell at his feet. He pleaded earnestly with him, "My little daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her so that she will be healed and live." So Jesus went with him. So this is the introduction to this little sandwich story. Is we see Jesus coming off the boat, this religious leader. This is a rich man. He's powerful. He's got everything in the world, but he's coming to Jesus begging for the life of his daughter. Come and heal her. A large crowd followed and pressed around him, and a woman was there who had been subject of bleeding for 12 years. Remember the 12 years. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all she had. Yet instead of getting better, she got worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came in behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, because she thought, if just touching his clothes, I will be healed. Immediately her blood stopped, and she felt in her body that she had that was freed from all of her suffering. Here you have a very rich man coming to Jesus for help of his daughter. He's powerful, he's got money, but he can't save his daughter. Here comes a woman in the crowd, crushing her way through to get to Jesus. She is powerless. She has nothing. In that culture, a woman without a husband is an outcast. She's got a blood problem of some sort. She can't get healed. She can't go to the temple. She can't go to the synagogue. She can't go to home fellowship, into someone else's home and have fellowship. She can't go to a community event. She's sneaking through here because if they find out who she is, they will push her away. And yet she comes and believes that Jesus, just like Jairus is believing about Jesus, that there is hope, that there is power, and there is the presence of God. At once Jesus realized that the power had gone out of him. He turned in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my clothes?" Now this is an amazing statement. You know, you ever been in a crowd where they were pushing and shoving and everything, and you were trying to get somewhere? They're bumping against you, and you know, that's this situation. And yet Jesus knows. What I say about Jesus before, he knows things, lots and lots of things. But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. Then the woman, knowing that what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet. She was trembling with fear, took hold of him and told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter." Now that's in a very important moment. Daughter. This is a woman who's an outcast, and Jesus is speaking to her as though he were a daughter, a relative, a member of his family. Your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering. Think about how that must have felt to her, how that must have changed her life completely. Total outcast, changed in a moment. Now we're going to part 3. While Jesus was speaking, some of the men came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue ruler. "Your daughter is dead," he said. "Why bother the teacher anymore?" Ignoring what they said, Jesus told the synagogue ruler, "Do not be afraid, just believe." Remember what was said about the woman? Believe. Now he's saying that to Jairus. Just believe. He did not let anyone follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. It's interesting. One of those people that went with him was where Mark got the story, probably, from Peter. And that's the reason I think it happened this way, in this sequence. But Mark recorded it as though it was the way it was, a sandwich. He didn't separate them out because it's important that they take place like this. He did not let anyone else follow him. When they came to the house of the synagogue ruler, Jesus saw a commotion with people crying and wailing loudly. He went in and said to them, "Why is this commotion? Why are you wailing? The child is not dead, but asleep." But they laughed at him. After he put them out, he took the child's father and mother and the disciples who were with him and went where the child was. He took her by the hand and said to her, and I can't say that phrase, but it means little girl. Little girl, I say to you, get up. Immediately the girl stood up and walked around. She was 12 years old. Get the connection? It fits together. At this, they were completely astonished. And he gave strict orders not to let anyone know about this and told them to give her something to eat. That's the messianic secret. And Jesus does this all the way through Mark because he knows that they're going to have a false understanding of what he's doing. And he doesn't want that. He wants the people who witness it to believe, but he doesn't want other people out there who hear the story to see it wrongly. Sometimes even when you tell the story correctly, people get it wrong because they have a preconceived notion in their head how it should be. Let's see, where am I going next? Oh, that's the end of the story. That's the end of the movie. But let me emphasize this. Mark is an excellent recorder of what he was told. You got to remember, these people didn't write much. To write this down cost a huge amount of money. Sometimes a year's worth of money to have something written down and then distributed. Mark is doing an unbelievable thing with this book, with this whole book that's named after him. In the end, everybody talks about the ending of Mark. Every scholar that does, and sometimes they try to discredit Mark because of the ending, but because he doesn't do the big, long resurrection of Jesus. He just has a short little piece. I think he did it for a purpose. Throughout Mark, he's recording things that shock people. He's not he's not telling a fairy tale. He's not trying to make everybody feel comfortable about what's going on because he's trying to shake them up. And he's doing it by relaying what really happened. He's being a reporter in that sense. In the end of it, there's a very short piece where the women witness Jesus, and it ends. It ends suddenly, and then there's a piece that's added. I believe that the piece was added because of Matthew, Luke, and John's long piece about the resurrection and afterwards. But the most important part of it is the resurrection. That's the most important part. But there is an important significance of these resurrection stories, and that is the presence of women who witness it first, who speak about it first, who are the first evangelists. And that's a significant thing, especially at a time in the religious world around us where they're trying to go back to where women are supposed to keep silent kind of stuff. The Gospel of Mark is blunt, to the point, and is remarkably accurate, I believe, because of one important thing. Luke and Matthew copied him. Think about that. If they hadn't copied the majority of this book, just think about that. It's significant. You don't copy something unless you believe it. And you don't copy something if you think you're going to be rejected for doing it. What you're doing is you're emphasizing the importance of it. And I think that's a wonderful thing about Mark. I really like little old Mark. We don't know where Mark was. At one time he was in Capernaum. We're not sure if he started the book or finished the book in Capernaum, but he went to Rome with Peter. We think maybe he might have finished it up there, or he might have even started it there. We don't know. He doesn't say. No one records what he did. But little old Mark, that's all I could say is I'm so thankful for little old Mark, because I honestly believe without little old Mark, we wouldn't have Matthew and Luke. I really don't think we would have. I don't think they would have written it unless they had gotten their hands on it. Now, they also got their hands on a smaller piece that we call Q, because we don't have a copy of it, but it's sections in Luke and Matthew that are the same, that are not in Mark, but they're the same in Luke and Matthew. And so we call them Q for question. That's what it means, question. We don't know who the person is. And it's just really interesting that how the Bible came to us. It's miraculous. It's wonderful. And all through the stages of the process of the Bible to get to us today, it's just like a miracle after a miracle after a miracle that has happened this way. Just think back before printing. People copied it. They sat at a desk and copied it word for word. Not just this, but the Apocrypha too, that they did, which is not in our Bible. It's the lesser records of things. And thousands of words sitting there day and night in a room with a candle as a light, scribing on a piece of paper. It's just amazing that this has come to us all these thousands of years. And it's just really, really amazing. Any questions? Anybody have any questions? Any questions?
Was Mark mentioned in Luke and...
We think so. We think he is John Mark. We think he's maybe that one. We're not sure. There is some, people say that it might be him, but we have no evidence that it is actually him. There are quite a few marks that have shown up in the history of the church. but we think it's John Mark. But John Mark was a common name, just like Smith, Jones, not like Elster. There's not many of us. So it's just interesting to me. It's just fascinating. And I at first, when Dr. Blevins wanted us to read it at least once a week all the way through, I thought, man, that's an awful lot with everything else I got to read. But once I got started, I was just overly fascinated. I don't know how many times I've read Mark all the way through just to do it, just to reread it. And that got me to read the New Testament, not all the way through in one sitting, but to sit down and read as much of it every day until I got all the way through it, and then do it again. I've done it several times. It makes a difference when you can see all of it in that full context of what's going on. It makes a difference in your understanding of what's going on. Sometimes we jump around so much, it's kind of hard to piece it all together, you know. And that's the reason I like the fact that we try to do things in series. And now, guess what I'm going to do first thing in the morning is next week's Sunday school lesson on Mark. Because the people who were supposed to do it can't come and do it. So instead of me recording someone else, I'm going to record myself. And I'm recording myself right now, and I got news for you. I'm going to cut it off before I get to this part. I can do that when I go to editing. So listen, we're early. Is that okay? It was short. It was a short lesson, and it didn't cover a whole lot of territory. But it was very interesting, I thought, to see that even in Jesus' life, he got interrupted. Because you think about that, because that's what happened. The woman interrupted him. But look what he did. He stopped and didn't shoo her away. He loved her. And that's what's important. Let's have a quick word of prayer, and then we'll go. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you so, so much for John Mark or whoever he was, for writing down these events in the life of Jesus. We thank you so much that Jesus came and loved us and loves us still. And pray that we can be the feet of Jesus and the hands of Jesus and the heart of Jesus in this community. Be with us, give us courage, give us strength, and most of all, help us to love. In the name of Jesus I pray, amen.